Hey everyone, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. Today I'm speaking with Mark DiMassimo, co-founder and creative chief at DiGo Brands, the positive behavior change agency. DiGo is the world's first creative agency focused exclusively on promoting better habits by building brands and businesses using positive behavior change marketing. I think Desuckifying Work falls under the positive change category, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. In fact, this is our longest episode to date, chock full of desuckified goodness. We talk about the value of curiosity and how it helped Mark survive the ego-crushing early days in his career. And we talk about the role of belief and faith and suffering in the work world. And we talk about how work can feel like torture and why that can either be tragic or transcendent. This discussion has already created some positive behavior change for myself, as I'm more motivated than ever to make this desuckify thing happen. Woo-hoo. I hope you come away feeling the same. Okay. Well, Mark DiMassimo, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
TJ, awesome. So happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here, Mark. I think we'll have a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, Desuckify sounds like exactly the project that I would love to get better at every day, So, and I've got, of course, ideas. So
yeah,
we can talk about a few experiments that have worked.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll get into all of it. And before we get into anything too deeply, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself to everyone who's listening. Some may know you from the world of advertising, but I'd love to kind of hear, how you got to where you are today and then what you're really focusing on right now.
Oh boy, when you ask me how I got to where I am today, first off, it's getting to be quite a long history. So I'm challenged to keep it short, but
okay.
I grew up. I grew up at this, intersection of needing to live frugal, young parents, working class neighborhood, sort of the cult and myth of invention in Edison, New Jersey.
Yeah.
In fact, we lived in South Edison, but my grandparents lived on some of the land that was first electrified by Thomas Edison, right next to where he invented the light bulb, where like that, there's a tower with the light bulb on top right there.
Oh, that's cool.
I grew up in the shadow of that. My dad was an electrical engineer and inventor. He had speed dial. Folks who follow me on LinkedIn, I've read about that recently and stuff, among some other things that are a little more complicated to talk about. But we had patents like, hanging up. So, I loved that. And I was, even though my dad was an inventor, he was sort of like a do the math, go through the steps engineer. Okay. And it became very clear that I was see the big picture, go at it at another angle, creative guy, Yeah. And I just love this idea of bringing this artistic and inventor's mindset to life, to the extent that, full of energy and naivete and probably, high testosterone as a young person. I didn't see problems. I guess I didn't see unsolvable problems. I just saw opportunities to be creative. So entrepreneurial. I was in bands first. Like, why can't we go on the road? Why can't we win the battle of the bands? So what if we're not 18? Why can't we get into that? As one of my good lawyer CEO friends says, it's probably good you didn't become a lawyer because you're not a rule follower. So I said, "You mean that I'm a criminal?" He said, "No, not at all. But you like to invent. You like to invent your own set of rules. You like to, think about things that aren't rule bound, but give you new ways to go at things." So I just was a creative person, but I wasn't like, I'm not somebody who watched 30 something or Bewitched or any of those shows and said, I've got to be an advertising person.
Mm-hmm.
I was somebody who looked at cult leaders and political leaders and religious leaders and door-to-door salespeople. And at some point it all came together, and I said, they're brand builders, they create their own worlds that attract the people who want those values for themselves. And I was just really fascinated by that. So, that I just was oriented toward it. I didn't know it at the time. I just acted that way, like I drove my poor Catholic mother crazy. I invited, I was the kid who like pushed my mom out of the way and say, sure, Jehovah's Witnesses, come on in. Let me see your slide presentation. 13 years old, so she's running for the crucifix, and I'm like, it's okay. It's all right. I just want to see what's the benefit. I met Mormon missionaries. My best friend was Dutch. He works for Apple now. I don't know if the world's allowed to know that, but my best friend growing up, he was a crazy creative too, and he was from Holland. And I was very interested in different perspectives. So we went on a trip to Holland, which I paid for by painting the whole house twice because my dad didn't feel it looked right the first time. And I met some nice Midwestern Mormon missionaries there. And I was like, absolutely, call on me when I'm back in the United States. I wanted to. And then I would like corner my mom in the kitchen, and I'd be like, if you want to know where you're going after and who you'll be with, I got a religion for you. And if you want to know exactly, like, if you want to be certain about what's right and what's not, I've got another religion for you. They all have benefits. They all have different benefits. So I don't know.
I'm sure that went over well.
It's funny because she taught like catechism on the weekends, but she taught biology weekend. She was picketed and sometimes because she would teach evolution. So, she was the one like terrorizing me as I had sisters, so I was the only boy, and she'd be like, you need to know what a period is. And I was like, Mom, I'm 4. Can't,
I think I can wait. Yeah.
Yeah. So she had size,
that's cool.
Sides, and she was educated, but I was a challenge to her, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that challenge.
So I got into the ad business first in direct marketing.
Yep.
And which was really interesting because you could create a whole brand and business in a single like print ad if you did it right, and people would respond. Or even a coupon or a television commercial. But as I started working for bigger clients, I got very frustrated with the left brain, like just rejection of brand and advertising. We were basically just gifted brands that were developed by other people, and then we would try to just suck the money out of them by, and I didn't want to play that game. So what I found out was if I worked on the entrepreneurs' accounts, they needed all of it,
Well, that's cool.
So you could like, what's this brand about, and what does it look like, and how should they feel about it, and how do we sell? And once I got there, I didn't want to let any of it go. I want to do all of it, and that's how I got where I am. I'm a glutton for all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I have some similar experiences. I definitely lived in the direct marketing world, and I get that feeling because there were times where it was very much sort of fed to you, and you had to just kind of go with it. But then you did occasionally get these opportunities where it was like, oh, I'm building something. And for a kid who was super curious and had an inventor father, like, I'm sure that's just suddenly like the light bulbs went off for you. To come back to the Edison story.
Thank you. Yeah, you pulled those themes together, but I can see what makes you a great coach, because you just kind of nailed those connections, in one sentence. But you're exactly right. It was addictive, because you have those number of moving parts, and you've got that psychology moving part, and you've got the visual, and you've got the words, you got the timing. It's all of these moving parts in your invention. And yeah, there's nothing, and then there's something. And you're right, sometimes in direct, you can't, you were like, especially when I was young, I'm like, I can't believe that they're letting me and a couple of other folks here create this whole business. Big companies like AT&T would come and they'd be like, yeah, we want to create a whole new category of credit card that's going to be both the phone card, and it's going to be you're going to be able to get points on it, and you're going to be able to, use it for various things, and figure out what it's about, what to say about it, what it looks like, all of it. Oh my God, this is a great game.
Yeah.
How often do you get to play such a kind of complicated, creative, fun game in life? And then you get measured, did it work? And if it works, I actually, for the project I'm talking about, I came up with, as part of the briefings, they said they made a decision that they wouldn't charge an annual fee. And it was early on, and now there are lots of no annual fee cards, but back it was early on. Their lawyers basically said, if you say up front that you're not charging an annual fee, you can't come back later and start charging an annual fee. At that time. Now lawyers have figured out what to do about that. So I heard that in a briefing, and then we were saying it's free. And so I'm sitting there and thinking, how do I beat it's free? Came up with this. So it went back and got to the CEO of the company and said, since you can't ever take this away, can we say it's free for life? Because people might even not even believe it's free, but if you say it's free for life, that's a pretty bold-faced lie. If it's a lie, I think people will. He said, sure, we could test it. So I actually think so. Basically, by day 2, it was the second most held credit card in the country. So one, it really worked. It knocked down AT&T's operator systems back in the day from people trying to figure out how to get it. And then it was a really successful business for a couple of years, but I actually think that I may have bankrupted that business because they got enormous numbers of folks who, especially older folks, enormous numbers, and they could not figure out how to make money out of them. They finally sold the whole thing to Citibank to figure out eventually.
That's interesting.
So yes, I learned a little bit about the business cycle there and about offers. If you have a lost leader, you better have a profitable follower.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting hearing you talk about all of that, because it's not only interesting in and of itself as a story, but I think, when I'm coming from this perspective of desuckifying work, like I hear the opposite of sucky work in what you're saying. Like I hear your excitement about it, your curiosity about it, your wonder. And then even the learnings that came, and it was like, oh, it was a good idea, but then there was no way to make money of it. And it sort of gave you this bigger business perspective. It seems like that probably, one, made life interesting at the time, but two, as you founded your own agency, and you suddenly had a lot more information to work with. You weren't simply a creative coming in and starting an agency. You were a creative who had learned some hard fought business lessons as well. Do you think that helped you along the way?
I think absolutely. I think, desuckifying work for an individual is it's an easier project, and it's an easier project to talk about than desuckifying work for everyone. Because I could say, if you have those values of not just being in your role, but thinking about the context of your role and being a business person, being a leader and all of that, that it will desuckify work. I'm sure there are folks out there who are meant to be the writer, and they get no joy from from taking these other perspectives that I do. And I do think that we all have different genetics, and we all have different background, and therefore we have, different natural things that light us up, right? But for me, I grew up in a time, and place, it's like the people who are kids in World War II are parents, and some of them, still traumatized or whatever. I had a guy who was a Nazi youth, not by choice, across the street, because everyone else, all the older men died. So they just came and took the 15 and 60-year-olds and called them Nazi youths and put them on the front.
Oh, geez.
And this guy, he's now gone. So I think I could say this publicly. He was as dumb as a stump. This poor guy, but he cared and he tried. But the men are gone. He's thrown up at the front. First time he sees a British soldier, he runs across and gives himself up. He's back in London, and now he's fishing unexploded bombs out of the Thames.
Wow.
I looked this up. Average life expectancy 3 weeks.
Gosh.
He survives the rest of the war.
Wow.
He's sent to the U.S. He is more or less immediately drafted and sent to Korea.
Oh, geez.
Now, at that time, there's not a live war. But he's sent to Korea, ends up serving 12 years, and then he's just kind of released into America. So these are the people and then the Vietnam War is on television. And my parents are young and distracted. My dad's reading his newspaper, and the Vietnam war is on. I'm seeing the second before somebody gets shot in the head when I'm 9 and 10, and there are arguments all around, and I'm thinking as hard as I can, why do people do what they do? How do people believe anything so strongly that they would kill or die for it? Because I'm going to get drafted and sent over there. It's not even that long. You're 9. And that at that point it was less than 10 years away. So I needed to know, how did anybody get that level of conviction? I sure didn't have it, or know how I could. So I got really fascinated by how people convinced themselves and what made people convincing. And so I think it was really a sort of an existential thing for me. How do you create peace if you don't understand why there's not peace? And also, how do you decide, because you don't know how long your life's going to be, and you're not necessarily in charge. How do you know what's worth dying for? And God forbid, how do you know what's worth killing for? That seemed like impossible, especially given I was being taken to church all the time and they were telling me, do not kill.
Do not kill. Yeah.
Jesus was not a soldier. So, so I needed to work this stuff out. But the more I got into it, the more I realized that for me, there wasn't an answer about what ultimately to believe, other than I believe that we're all on journeys, and we gravitate to the things that fit our own idea of what the next level of development is for us. And I think we do have some internal guidance, if we can tap into it, about what feels like the right next step for us and all of that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of stories that can inspire us or distract us, in a sense, from our own inner compass. So to some extent, my religion became brand building, marketing, and I just became fascinated by all the stories and myths and how they connect to stuff. So so I'm, work is desuckified for me because I'm so curious that if my ego had to take a hit. I mean, look, I've met so many people who, whatever the task at hand was, they were more talented or more accomplished than I was, especially early in my career. I'd go to meetings. I couldn't even understand how people could have ideas on the fly when I first got there. Things that are easy for me now are really hard. But God, I'd be so excited about their ability to create an idea that I admired, or create work that I admired. My love for the process, my love for great work, great solutions, and my love for learning made up for the suffering, for the torture of my ego being regularly crushed.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
And then when I got to seek out my own kinds of clients and stuff like that, basically said, I'd rather suffer working for a visionary like Steve Jobs, who I didn't, except for indirectly, ever get to work for Steve. And I know some people have, so I want to make that clear. I'm not claiming that. I did work on some Apple stuff. Well, he was there, but I didn't have that direct experience of him. But still, I said, I because I believe, in a sense, there's no one right brand for everybody, and therefore it's not even rational, in a sense. It's not wholly rational what a brand should be. Having somebody with a fantastic confidence in their irrational vision, but pragmatic enough to make sure it's a vision that serves enough of a market that it works. I want to learn from people like that. I'd like to be someone like that. So I think that was the other thing. My goal was, I want to be able to create brands. I don't want to just write books or write ad campaigns. I want to be able to, have that power of creating brands and businesses in the world. Because then I work for myself, having fun doing experiments, working with the kind of people I want to work with.
Yeah.
So that's Desuckified work for me.
Yeah. Which, I think it comes through loud and clear, right? I mean, I can hear it in your tone, in your excitement. It's really interesting to hear you, sort of use this connection of, brands sort of became your religion, and whether you take that literally or not, I don't think matters as much as just religion as a substitute for the idea that it's just something that you felt connected to that made you feel bigger than just yourself in some way, right? It somehow took you out of simply being you and sort of feeling connected to the process of creation. I hear that when you talk about some of your stories, right? The process of connecting with different people, right? Yes. I mean, it's not simply working with like-minded folks. It's like, I want to work with that person who seems completely nuts, but there's something there, and I want to see what happens when we butt heads and see what happens there. I mean, I feel that. And then I love the notion you mentioned about, that it almost felt like torture. I think I saw that you had posted something, and there was a quote from Seinfeld: "Find the torture you're comfortable with and you'll do well." And it really resonated with me, and I'm sure it resonates with you because you posted it. But it's kind of like, that's a bit of what I hear also when you talk about this being your religion. It's like belief and faith and all that. That's not supposed to be easy, right? There is supposed to be some sense that it's like, it's taking a lot out of you, but then it gives it back, in multiples. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's really come up quite a bit. You've quoted from something I put on LinkedIn, but it's really come up quite a bit in the LinkedIn conversations that I've had today. And someone responded to that Seinfeld quote with a Bukowski quote: "Find the thing you love and let it kill you."
Yeah.
And my response to that was like, that. But it's interesting because I didn't write this long, but what I had in my mind was Bukowski started Catholic, and sort of trended toward, Buddhism and end stage alcoholic, right? But whereas, Seinfeld started, I think, sort of secular Jewish, and gravitated toward TM and transcendence, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I don't know whether he would identify as having being Buddhist or anything like that, but clearly his ideas and his religion, if you think of religion as what you do, right, as your rituals, is that way. So it's interesting that they both came from someplace to this middle way, and there's definitely something in Catholicism, in the tradition, that where virtue comes from sacrifice, and that sacrifice can be, can be bloody, and it can be like being killed by the thing you love. Right. Whereas that doesn't necessarily exist in Buddhism, which is about, life is already torture. Right. There isn't torture, right? You're finding the middle way. So different cultures come at it a different way. I kind of like it. I just saw today someone posted a Monopoly campaign, and I think it's from Europe. And it's kids, and it's two parents, and every ad is an image of a kid at the Monopoly table crying, like in some state of pain, and it basically says, learn patience, learn to lose gracefully, and like every game worth playing, or by the way, watching, spectating, the ecstatic experience, it's a passion play. It's not all joy, Absolutely. if you're not suffering for it, you're not really getting the experience.
Yes.
So what in your life is worth suffering for, not unnecessarily, but through the necessary parts. Like, what do you want so badly that you suffer when you don't get it, or that you'll suffer to get to?
Yeah.
It's easy for me to have ideas. It's very hard for me to kill my darlings and simplify all of that.
I feel that.
But gosh, when I do it, or when I'm part of it, I love to have done it. I love nothing than the most elegant result on the other end. But it doesn't come out of what's easy for me and gives me joy. 100 headlines is easy for me.
Yeah, I think there's so much.
It's the one that's hard.
There's so much, the sort of, I feel like we're in the midst of the sort of broader conversation around work, and I would say life in general. We're sort of struggling with all of this. There's probably one extreme that might be like sort of what you might go to like toxic positivity, where it's just like, right, only lean into the joy, only lean into pleasure, like, and put a happy face on everything you can. And then there's sort of the other extreme, which would be like nihilism. And I think you feel a lot of that from people too. And,
sure, yeah.
And there's this sort of rich middle ground that I think those of us who are interested enough are playing in, which is, where is that balance of, I'm willing to work and suffer and feel pain, feel rejected, in service of something. And that may be something that evolves over time. It may be something that you find when you're 25 and you just stick with it and try to grow with it. And I love that battle is sort of happening. And it's interesting because in some ways I see it on LinkedIn, and that's probably my favorite part of LinkedIn, is that it's like everybody's coming at this battle in different ways and you learn a lot. And I think you guys as an agency, you've kind of landed in an interesting space, right? I mean, you started as this cool, interesting hybrid of sort of direct and brand, which is sort of a lot. And in more recent years, you've gone into this space of positive behavior change, and which is a term that some people might be familiar with and others may not. So I'd love to hear your take on, one, what is positive behavior change, and what got you thinking that way in terms of the work you do for brands?
Thank you. Great question. if you're lucky, if you're lucky, you work on the things that you want and need,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, um, I kind of arrived in adulthood, call it 18, 19, 20, 21, far from finished. How do I deal with my emotions? How do I deal with my anxieties? I've noticed this about a lot of the creative people that I've worked with, that I liken the imagination. I liken my imagination, but I'm not trying to claim it as only mine. I mean, well, a lot of creative directors I've worked with and for have been this way too. But I think of our imaginations as like thoroughbreds. And you get on top of a thoroughbred and you don't know how to ride it, and you are dead. And so, they end up with anxieties and then panic attacks, or they depress themselves because they can imagine in 3D Technicolor, whatever their emotions are leading them to imagine, which can mean they can scare the F out of themselves. And so, that's the way, that's kind of I was on the, I was coming up with, band ideas and business ideas and, innovations and all of that, or I was coming up with things to scare the hell out of myself. And I needed to learn how to deal with that. This relates to what you said about positivity and toxic positivity. A lot of people are allergic to that word positive. We say we're positive behavior changing because they associate toxic positivity.
Yep.
I had some friends, like way back early in the 80s. So I'm in my early 20s then. They're in 12-step programs for addictions. And I didn't have addictions. I come from a family where if we have our third drink, our eyes get crossed and we don't feel good. So we have a real difficult time developing alcoholism or anything like that. But I felt like I needed meetings. So I went to some open meetings with a couple of my friends who were in AA. And like, here were people, I expected to feel sorry for people. And here now, I had these people stood up and I was like, these are my gurus. Like, there was one guy stood up and he's like, let me tell you what I did. I made myself a sandwich today. And I gave it my attention, and I wanted to take care of myself. So I made myself a really nice sandwich, and I ate it and I enjoyed it and I felt good. And some people will hear this and they'll think that I'm, feeling cynically about this person or making some kind of joke or whatever.
Right.
All I can tell you is I wanted to follow that guy home. He was probably, 66 at the time or whatever. But I felt he had found something, in life, the ability to take care of himself and do ordinary things and feel good. That I wanted, striving for something I didn't have, not needing to fix it, not trying to tamp it down. So I did follow him and I said, would you be my sponsor? And he said, well, you first have to admit you're an alcoholic. And I said, well, I'm not an alcoholic. He said, are you sure? Let me ask you some questions. So he asked me a bunch of questions and he said, well, this is the first for me, but I don't think you're an alcoholic. So I can't be your sponsor.
Right.
But there is a thing called Emotions Anonymous. So I actually went in my 20s. I went to some Emotions Anonymous meetings. And the first thing you say is, I'm powerless over my emotions. But it relates to what you said about toxic positivity. So you're not trying to control your emotions. The first step is acceptance. So if you feel down, you feel down right now. If you feel down on yourself or angry at yourself, that's how you feel right now. Emotions change, but emotions that are unaccepted and unacknowledged either don't change or they create other negative emotions. We want to be seen and we have the ability to see ourselves. So I went through that change of being able to accept myself moment to moment, more or less, better and better. And it made a massive difference in my life. I started to meditate. I saw other people, and I saw that nothing and no, I never met anybody who didn't get better if they could tolerate sticking through the hard parts. And I did see people who, whenever they got to the same hard part, disappeared or blew up or went back to a drug or whatever. And that's the hardest case, because you could, having seen everybody else, you could see, oh my God,
it's there.
It feels like the crisis, but it's actually you're just it's a hump. You can get over it. But I was like, all right. I learned from that. I realized, okay, it's dark. It is darkest before the dawn when it comes to your own emotions and adjustment. So I got that for myself. So that's why, I was like, my first priority, did I want to make money? Yes. Did I want to have a successful agency? Yes. Did I want people to say I did my best work there? Absolutely. Did I want creative respect? Sure. All of it, but none of it as much as feeling authentically myself as I went through the process, and participating in that game of being inspired and inspiring. And would I sacrifice some degree of those other things? Sometimes all of those other things, and at other times some degree of those other things, in order to stay in that zone? Absolutely. Because how much money do you need, and how many awards do you need? And but that's life, that's energy. So I wanted it for myself. So when I started the agency, I just basically said, the mission of the agency is to be inspired. And so to inspire and be inspired. That was really the mission. So we're going to look for inspiring clients doing inspiring things. We're going to inspire them. And what I had to bring was this brand response thing, this, build a business, build a brand and build a business together. And over time, with success, we realized that success was being able to get away with narrowing our focus. So, rather than necessarily getting bigger and bigger, although, bigger has been nice too, but instead of that, we had the power to narrow our focus. We treated people well. We had good references. We did good work. We built nice brands. We had successes and case studies. And so we could then tighten up, and we said, well, we care about behavior change for ourselves. I actually believe that a lot of change and innovation is driving us crazy. So, and that made me think, people, there'll be a boom in businesses and brands and categories that help people keep themselves moving in a positive way, and feeling that they have agency in their own lives, so from coaching to apps. I use Fabulous and some other other apps on here. I try them all, and I just felt, one, there'll be a boom. Two, I'll feel really good. I'll learn. So I love this stuff. Like, I'm watching Peter Attia and who's that guy at Stanford who, all those people. Anyway, I'm doing it anyway.
Right.
not out of a sense of desperation, fortunately, because I feel great, and I fortunately I felt great for a long time. I'm not good now. I'm alive, and therefore bad things can happen. But out of the joy of learning more, and hopefully I get to share it with folks. So we focused in on that. So it's healthy, wealthy, and wise. Is sort of the outcomes of the clients we look for. So we're big in wellness and reasonably active in health. care and innovation as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of empowering self-directed or community-based financial services and innovators in financial services and fintech and that sort of stuff. We've been and education in both of those categories, and then education. And there's some like edutainment in there too. So,
sure.
Which is everything from like, training nurses and doctors, through Adtalem and, University of New Haven to like Wondrium, which is, it's education, it's entertainment. It's like everything from lectures to documentaries and on and on. I could go on and on, but those are our worlds. And what we do is we brand behavior change, we advertise it, and we drive it in a measurable way. Those are our three pillars. We probably do more of one and two, but our R&D, that where we really are working the hardest, not because we want it to be our biggest thing, but because we want to be accountable, is on that last pillar.
Yeah.
We find often that our clients don't have the measures in place. In fact, I talk to some clients and they say it doesn't exist yet, but
yeah,
they don't have the measures in place to really know whether when my campaign works, their business gets better. So anyway, it's fun to explore, and it's fun to explore with a variety of creative people. And, last thing that, that aren't the same as me, that are bringing something different, the different perspective that challenges mine, so that, the output is something I couldn't have done on my own.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's like, you come to that place often through time and experience and a bit of maturity in the ad business, where you start to really get excited about the things that maybe wouldn't have come just from your own mind, but it's actually the joy comes from all of those interactions and all of that input that comes from all these other people and places that suddenly like create this new thing that you're like, I would have never gotten there. And there's so much joy from that. And I think with the positive behavior change, I think, in addition to it, like totally making sense in the context of the world feels sort of unsettled and chaotic as technology and all this stuff improves. And I love technology. And I think you're a tech fan too, but you see the challenges and the effect it's having on us. And so, yeah, it totally makes sense that there's a need for more of this, however it's done. And for you guys, it's doing it through the lens of brands, which I think about, connecting that to desuckifying work. And there's a couple thoughts that come to mind, but I also want to get your perspective. Like when I think about building brands, I also think you're in parallel building or shaping a culture for that company in terms of the way they work and the way they are. And that surely must have some effect on the people who work there. I think when you make positive behavior change a thing and you invite more and more people into it, there's some growth there, right? You're now creating a growth market of companies that are doing this, and maybe people are observing and going, I want some of that. So there's, you talked about the desuckification for yourself is sort of easier because it's contained to some degree, but this is where it starts to open up. Am I hitting on some things that connect for you? And is there more to the story?
Well, you absolutely are. Brands are. I'm going to go all the way back to where you started with technology, just as a start. Yeah, I'm a massive enthusiast for tech and innovation. I love change, and I am really suspicious of stasis. I won't say the status quo, because people are paranoid about the status quo now, and I don't think I'm paranoid. But stasis. I feel like when you have a market leader, if you don't have challengers, that power is going to corrupt. There's no other place to go but the DMV. That's the problem with the DMV. and I realize that it's hard to solve a problem for everybody. So, I also realize that government is not easy. And, you know, um, with it's kind of breathtaking. I know a lot of people disagree with this now. It's kind of breathtaking how thorough the experiment in freedom is in our country. It really is, when you really think about it. And yes, there are limits and there are issues and all of that, but it's pretty breathtaking. And I do agree with the founders of this country, many of whom said that if you don't have a virtuous and disciplined citizenry, you can't have sustainable freedom. So what that means is, if you really want to make the most of tech and you want to make the most of a market that's mostly free, and a culture where you really get to make choices, you need systems at the individual level. That's disciplines, mindsets and values. You need at company level or organization level cultures. And brands are sort of like signals of culture, right? They're the signposts of culture, so people can find their ways to the cultures where that have the things they want to get, right? And then you also need systems at the regulatory and legal and governmental level. You need all kinds of systems at all kinds of levels. Otherwise, freedom becomes chaos, and that doesn't lead to anything good. Certainly not directly. So brands are that. There is one simple. The thing is, if you follow a lot of I don't think people intend this, but if you follow a lot of the trend of conversation now, people feel, often for very good reasons, traumatized. And trauma, when you've experienced trauma and you're in a state of post-traumatic stress or disorder or whatever, things trigger fear, right? Fear state, and you're easily triggered. And when you're operating out of a state of fear, it is hard or impossible to get access to the states that desuckify work.
No, you're right.
Because you're operating above the line, you're operating in creativity. So I'll go back to what I said before. Now, if I'm not saying deny that, if you feel below the line, if you feel fear, in a sense, the best way to deal with it is to accept it and accept that that's where you happen to be at the moment. Maybe give yourself some love, give yourself some reassurance, or just give yourself the gift of being real with yourself if no one else is, right? And where I am right now. If you do that, you'll find it changes, right? And then maybe you then have access to a creative state. I think if we all live in fear and trauma and just try to take the pain out of work, that then the work sucks. And when the work sucks. Because it's still, there's no work without suffering. That's why they call it work. That's what they pay for. So unless something inspiring comes out the other end, work sucks. No matter how how diverse, open-minded, friendly, non-bullying, no matter how non-negative your culture is. I believe in all those non-negatives, and I actively pursue all those non-negatives. Non-negative is not enough.
Right. That's not
the
positive.
Experience of excellence. And when I used to just, my whole career, I would ask folks, where's the best place you ever worked and who's the best person you ever worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never heard so and so was so easy to please.
Yeah.
And it's just, whatever I brought, it was like thumbs up. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I've always heard like that I wanted what that person had in terms of the work output. That person was tough, sometimes hard to understand, challenging. But wow, there's a chance of doing the best work of your career. And yeah, we were competent, even though it was crazy. That's what I so that's hard. That's a hard leader to be, because you're not pleasing people at every moment. You're challenging them.
Yeah.
So the work can't suck. That's one of the most important things,
Yeah, that's, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that I don't just mean, I don't just mean the creative output. I mean, whatever the work is,
whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, right? Because like you said, the suffering will be there, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, what are you willing to suffer through? What are you willing to be tortured by? That's happening. Like, to some degree, there's going to be some level of suffering and torture when you do any kind of work. If you don't walk away with some level of satisfaction, pride, excitement, joy, whatever, inspiration, to use the word you guys were using there, like, that's when you get a lot of what I think we've been seeing over the last few years is, there's been the trauma, and then there's been the workplace, people trying to maybe work through some of that trauma in the workplace. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that maybe wasn't a good idea to start with, because like you said, you need to recognize the trauma first. And acknowledge it. But I think, when you think about the idea of brands and positive behavior change and all of the freedom experiment, I thought was really interesting of America. Like, brands in some ways are playing a role that is different than they used to, because of maybe the decline in some of the cultural institutions around religion and some of those other things, which I'm not going to judge that as good or bad, because I think everybody's going to have their opinion on that. But I think what's clear is there is a need for some cultural institutions to provide things like meaning for people, to provide things like growth through suffering, all that kind of stuff, to provide inspiration, aspiration, and to the extent that brands can play a role in it, I think that's really cool. I think on a broader scale, I think we need all of it in some measure, right? We need some balance of things that help us make sense of all this stuff. When you think about the positive behavior change you do on behalf of brands, I imagine it does, but does that apply to your brand? And if so, how does that show up in terms of the way you've sort of nurtured your culture at your company?
It does. It does. It has to. We believe, as soon as those words, positive behavior change, leave our mouths. There's an implied promise in that, people, and, look, it's when I first started, I don't get much criticism now of it, because I think, it's just been there now a long time. But in the beginning, I would get some criticism when I first started talking about positive behavior change. And some of it was advertising people who, were worried about toxic positivity, or just didn't like my point of view that we should consider the effect of our work on people. Like, it's hard enough to make money. So now you're telling me to sell lottery tickets, I'm promoting, gambling. Come on, this is hard enough. And my job's to be a creative person and shut up. And, that's the whole thing about brands. I define what matters most to me, what my values are. And if you want to be in my tent, we can do it together, but we're not trying to define it for the whole world, but we believe in it for ourselves, right? And for our community. So there was some of that, but some of it also was, this is a boring way to communicate positive behavior. Three dull words and all of that. And I had actually a lot of sympathy for that criticism, because with the clients, I tell a client, don't get to your strategy and assume that that's your advertising and just start communicating it to the world. That's a rookie mistake. But I did feel that positive behavior change are to us what authentic athletic performance is to Nike. So it's a mantra. It shouldn't be in the advertising. It's not. I also, when I met with the team and realized what the reality of our situation was, I felt it was the lesser of evils to just get it out in the world, ugly as it was. In fact, the willingness to do something unslick might actually prove to be a benefit. I thought, but I just felt we needed a line in the sand in order to tell us what else we needed. And what we learned was, as soon as we put that line in the sand, one is you better be able to help your employees and team members with their own positive behavior change. You got to care about how you want to grow. You got to ask them from the beginning, what do you want to get that have growth plans. And in a world where you don't necessarily have linear paths because everything's changing, how do you help people get their, pursue their own positive growth? You got to care about their lives as well. So we do all of that. There are certain things we've done to Desuckify work for 27 years. We've never had a timesheet. Never had it.
Amen.
I just, I felt from my experience in other agencies that, I might be overgeneralizing for my own behavior, but I thought timesheets made creative people into liars. And I said, it's not a nice thing to do to people, to give them a job and then turn them into a liar on day one.
Favorite works of fiction were some of my timesheets.
Some of the best creative work you've ever done, right? So, and then every once in a while, the feds come in and they take someone away too, like usually the CEO or the CFO. But I just said, I don't want to do that. I think we sell value, we don't sell time, and we're going to find a way around it. So one, we don't do that. Two, early on, we said, we're a work from anywhere, work freedom, we called it, work from anywhere culture. And it just was like, again, not solving the problem for everyone, but we're an entrepreneurial, independent, more than a quarter century old agency in New York. I won't say old, agency in New York City. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People don't want to move to New York City in the middle of a pandemic. People would love to work for a real New York City agency. And maybe the best people everywhere are better than the best people somewhere for us. Try, get ahead of it, be entrepreneurial. So that's worked really well. That requires us to be really thoughtful about culture and how we connect. Connections are really important. And that's, you can't do that unconsciously when you're work from anywhere. We still have an office in New York. Clients like an agency with an office, and people also like to go to an agency with an office, even if they don't go to the office. Right.
No, I get that. So what are you doing on the culture front? What are you doing to sort of nurture that side of the connectivity?
Wow, it's really a lot, and it's also a lot of it is in shift right now as we really think about what's working best and what isn't. First off, we've got I would love to shout out Kenny Thacker, who is our DEI catalyst at the agency. Catalyst is what he calls himself, but catalyst is what he truly is. I mean,
Mm.
for me, if he didn't know a thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
He would still be on my advisory board as a creative entrepreneur,
Mm.
and as a social entrepreneur too.
Oh, okay.
He saw problems that weren't getting solved,
Mm-hmm.
and um, he he got people around him, and he just went to solving those problems.
Mm-hmm.
He created organizations for people of color, really for the whole spectrum of diversity in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he created training, and to get people into the industry and introduced to the industry that
Mm.
weren't being invited and
Yeah.
didn't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we have a whole basically menu of experiences and all of that goes on throughout the year that Kenny curates with an internal
Nice.
DEI team, including Jennifer Simotis, who heads
Mm-hmm.
our talent
Yeah.
at the agency.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's real. I think that's really it's really important. I don't, I think a lot of people think of diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of as a duty, and I don't argue that they shouldn't, and
Yeah.
I don't argue that
I get
they
what you're
don't.
saying, though. Yeah.
Um, but I don't think I think that comes out from that below the line sense of fear and lack.
Mm.
And again, you can say, all right, this is true. We have lacks. We could do better.
Mm-hmm.
We have things to atone for, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But don't stop there.
Right.
Um, you know, true diversity is how creativity happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the disconnects that the opportunities are created.
Yep.
It's a kind of is diversity suffering? Actually, this may not be popular. It is.
Mm.
It is. It is if it's really working. If people aren't code switching, if they're actually, if they're actually bringing,
Being authentic. Yeah.
their to be authentic, bringing
Yeah.
their true point of view to the table, and if they can, there will be misunderstandings, there will be gaps, there'll be
Mm-hmm.
clashes.
Yep.
But I mean, that's where great things
That's the
are
good stuff.
born, right?
Yeah.
That's the cauldron. So that's
Yeah.
just one thing. I mean, we have educational things. Everybody has a growth plan.
Mm-hmm.
We've only just rolled out Growth Plan 2.0. I had a great internal team kind of working on that. I've got this place is piled with books, positive leadership, great
Nice.
sort of simple approach, but all comes out of University of Chicago. Kim Cameron,
Mm-hmm.
the Nimble company,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. David Gruder, Mark Smith, Tony
Mm.
Bodo, and I are all sort of part of this think tank consultancy that
Mm.
does mobility. Obviously I have my day job. So, but David and Mark actually wrote two books,
Oh, nice.
the Nimble Company and the Nimble C-Suite.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that, and then I'll tell you the newest thing is a recommitment to, if you're not driving your own learning and growth, you're wrong.
Mm.
I think that there's just that challenge, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's fine. People can be incurious, but not at our place. They
Right.
can't.
Yeah.
You can just decide to hate AI, for example, and that you want no part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but not here.
Yeah.
Like here, you can acknowledge all the negatives
Mm-hmm.
and all and you can acknowledge any of the positives you want, but we will play. We're creative
Right.
people. We play.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are. If you want to learn about that, you want to learn about an aspect of positive behavior change. You want to learn about a category. You want better, at some kerning, whatever it is, it's craft. Understand a target audience better. There's just so much to learn. So we basically looked at each other as leaders and said, it's not our job to spoon feed. Yes, programs. It's our job to create a culture where our people's enthusiasm for learning isn't suckified by being, by being blocked every step of the way. They learn something, they talk about what they learn, and no one cares. That's a suckifying moment. Say, why don't we try? And everyone's like, no, let me tell you what to do. That's a suckifying moment. Or, hey, I really want to take this course. Will you help me with this financially? And if we can, the answer should be yes, because we want to encourage value. So it's more like set a standard, tell them this is what it means to be in this culture. The rule is you're a learner. You've got to have an agenda for yourself. And we're not going to tell you what it has to be. We'll tell you how relevant it is to what you want to achieve here, in our opinion.
Right. Sure.
But, it's your enthusiasm that guides you. So that's where we are right now.
No, I love it.
I hope that people see and hear a 61-year-old with the enthusiasm of a kid about this stuff. That's, I think that's how I experience myself. I'm so, on fire about this stuff, and that's it. I want to stay alive in this business. I want to help other people do it too. That's really,
it comes through loud and clear, Mark. And I think there's a couple things in what you just said that were particularly interesting. One, I think you have a very clearly defined culture, that, and I think you can do that whether you work in an office, you work from anywhere, I think, but you've clearly defined it. You talk about, you have to be a learner, you show up here, you have to be curious. I think that's what people are craving. I think when people walk into the doors, virtual or not, of a company, and they don't get that, that's when people flounder. That's when people feel this sense of isolation and loneliness and hopelessness and nihilism on the extreme. Because it's like, I would much rather walk in the doors, and I've had this happen, walk in the door where it's a very clearly defined culture, and I just go, nope, not for me. And I walk back out, but I'm grateful because you told me who you were, and I recognized it wasn't for me. And then you walk into the next place and you're like, that's it. You're my team because you defined something. And that is such a gift, I think, for anybody who's running a business to bring that to bear. I think this thread of entrepreneurship seems to come through loud and clear in what you guys are doing. And I think to your point of the book, Nimble, it rang a bell for me there of, that's the world we're in. We're in a world where you have to be nimble. And I think you have to embrace some kind of spirit of entrepreneurship for yourself, whether you're going to be a happy worker bee your whole life. To your point, you've got to own that career. You've got to make the choices and figure out where you're most curious and go after it. That spirit is needed no matter where you fall on any kind of org chart, or whether you're running a business or just, filling one box on a giant org chart. If you don't have that, I think that's where the suffering without the release of the joy and the inspiration comes from. So I think that message that sort of was just dripped in all along from this conversation, I hope people feel that and recognize that there's a lot to be said for embracing that entrepreneur's mindset, whether you want to start any kind of business or not.
Wow. It would be hard for me to improve on what you just said, and certainly in terms of expressing my values too. Where we are, I feel like the spirit of invention I talked about, in the spirit of entrepreneurship, it is, we can make choices in life, but we're born into contexts, and there are limitations to, free as we are, there are limitations, and some prices are just too high. Like I've got family here. I'm not going to move to some ideal place that I don't even know exists, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to Monaco, I live here. And, sometimes we blame ourselves for the problems that the context we're in just gives us. There are people in Hollywood, like the studios are, they're in a battle right now. And there have definitely been evil people in Hollywood. We know that.
Yeah.
And there have probably been some saints too. But most of the people there are people trying to achieve their dream, whatever it is. I want to make a movie and not go bankrupt, and no one knows really anything about how to make a successful movie. I want to get it funded and I want to get it made, or I'm a writer and I want to make a living and I want to produce good work. And a lot of the conflict they're in, it's a symptom of the system. And it's it just is. So you have to kind of walk through. It's a suffering that goes with, I do think, just last thing I'll leave you with. So Shawshank Redemption, everyone's seen it. And in the Shawshank Redemption, there's a lot to say about that. I won't say a lot. The nightmare is to become an institutional man, right? That's I forget the name of that character who says that, but I think I'm an institutional man. And, become institutionalized. And in the end, our hero, he swims through a mile of shit and escapes the institution. And then he is no longer in an institution of any kind. He is on Dream Coast with his own boat. And, at the very end, they give you that he has a friendship. But that's it. That's the institution he's in. My belief about human beings is that we're social animals, and that we achieve, most of us, except for saints and madmen, we achieve our fulfillment and potential through commitment to institutions, some of which we're born into, and we just don't leave, and others that we freely choose. And there are no perfect institutions, and there are all different levels, but institutions are just systems that we choose to be together in and with in order to get things done, and there's all kinds of things to be said about that, but I think so. I think some of the pain we get just goes with these institutions that we're part of. They're all like sandwiched in each other. But this is why, though, if you're in a business context, if you're in an entrepreneurial world, which is like this intersection of a mostly free market and all of that, and you can't access that mindset, you're kind of flying blind. Don't fly blind, because I want you to get where you're going to go, even if all you want to do is write novels. Like, you need to know your numbers. You have to, so that you can make time to write, if that's what you want to do. You got to know your numbers.
I think it's just being sort of relentlessly curious and trying to understand the world of which in you're operating and how best you can operate within it, right? And I think, speaking of the world we're operating in and this desuckifying work, I think I know the answer based on your persona in general and what you've said, but are you optimistic about the state of work and where we can take it?
It's funny. I was brainstorming with myself either yesterday or the day before, because I'm frankly paranoid about because I'm positive in my public persona. I'm very paranoid about this whole perception of toxic positivity, that it could steer the culture wrong. People might get the wrong idea. I care more about the culture than the perception, but it could steer the perception wrong. But I'm more concerned with the internal culture, because that toxic positivity will not work. We have to be realists first and foremost. I was thinking I need a word better than optimist, because optimist means too many things. It's ambiguous. Optimist means I expect things to get better.
Yeah.
And optimist can also mean I will work to optimize things.
Yeah.
And I'm the second kind of optimist.
Yeah.
I studied Holocaust. I studied political science, and I was really interested in how bad things could get. I was fascinated by the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, they created enormous amounts of upward mobility by running people over with cars and then smashing them over the head with the shovels in case they weren't already dead. I mean, we're talking tens of millions.
Right.
And then the gulags and all of that. So things can get very, very bad. And I don't hide that from myself. It actually creates a lot of energy and meaning to creating, to solving problems and creating more positive institutions, right? So, I'm a realist who works at optimizing every day.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I think there's a phrase I used to use, and I still occasionally, just an active optimist or active optimism, which is kind of what that you were.
An activist.
I mean, you are, it is not the sit back and watch the world get better kind of optimism, because that to me is just foolishness, to be honest with you. It's because as many examples that you've started to bring up from, our history as human beings, it shows if you just sit back and wait, human nature can go to some pretty ugly places. But if you step in and say, I'm going to try to be a part of moving us in a better direction, one, you now have a reason to hope, and two, that hope is often well-founded, because history is also riddled with lots of stories of people banding together and forming institutions that helped improve our lot as human beings. So I think you're on to something when you talk about that realistic kind of optimism.
And when you do it, while you're doing it, for the most part, I mean, if you're not being in prisons or, executed or whatever, for the most part, while you're doing it, you're living within this island of hope, because you're acting out hope, and you're in Mr. Rogers, words, paraphrased, you are that person in the picture who's helping. So you're living in that island of hope. I mean, my short answer to your question is I don't know if I'm optimistic that we will. Will things get better before they get worse with the big old we? I don't know. I can't come down on one side or another. I do know that everyone like you and like me who is excited about working on making it better needs to. Where every one of us is needed. And look, if we overdo it, that's the least of our problems.
Could be worse. Well, I mean, I think when you think about everybody collectively, hopefully working towards this project, and what would it look like to you if we did kind of wave the magic wand and it was a desuckified world of work? I mean, I think some of the things you talked about in terms of what you're building with your own company and some of the things you're thinking about from positive change seem like they connect here, but is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about this fully desuckified work world?
Look, I think, it takes courage. And it also takes, it takes another kind of suffering, which is the willingness to see your own failings and limitations as a leader. And I don't mean wallow in them. And I don't mean, because I think that it's actually not humility when you think you're the most important thing in the world, and therefore your failings are so important. But I think it's actually that lack of humility that keeps people from looking at their own failings. Like, none of us is the perfect leader. We've never had, outside of, deities, people may believe it or not, but we've never, no human being was ever the perfect leader. and we have to see where we're coming up short in order to step up where we need to.
Yeah.
People, I can say I want to have a really positive environment. There were times in my agency's history where we were on a beautiful path to our inspiring action and positive behavior change. And then we got ourselves a couple of clients that were running cultures that didn't align.
Yeah.
In the beginning of those relationships, and for too long, for months, I was caught, and my other leaders and I were caught between, our job is to give the client a great experience and to please them, and is there a way that we can address these things without, undermining the client relationship and the money that's paying for people, because we could be courageous and then the client goes away and then the money goes away and then we fire the people. That's not very positive.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, at that point, I look at myself and basically say, it is never too early to be clear about what your values are and to negotiate for your people the experience that you've promised them. It's never too early, no matter what the fallout is. It's never too early to do that. And the truth is, the delay and being over sophisticated and too nice or any of those things, it's just a tangled web.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I had to test myself by resigning those clients. Actually, some of those clients are now my closest friends, because they're like, God, somebody said it. I'm out of here. I'm out of here in 2 months.
Yeah.
That's what I got. So I was like, wait a second. This wasn't just us.
It's the beauty of being able to be honest and forthright, though, because you're probably on both sides going like, I can't say it because I don't want to hurt, like you said, being too nice about it. And then it's like you say it and suddenly it's like, yeah, this is clearly the best thing for everybody. And then you can still actually be friends with them, because it's now that relationship, the context is very different now. And you can operate through that context rather than this sort of mismatched sort of company values context, which is never going to go to a good place, probably.
Yeah. They've actually experienced you as somebody who put something above money.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, that may be a rare experience. And,
I think it is. Yeah, no, I think it definitely is. And I think what I get from your answer here to that question is, ultimately, there really is no fully desuckified work world. It's more like, let's just keep pointing in that general direction.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a bumpy ride, and it's going to have a lot of suffering and pain. But if we keep doing it, the general trend will be upwards, but never approaching perfection, which is perfectly fine. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, because that's exactly what I thought coming in. Desuckify is like disinfect. And it's not like, hey, we did it so we can get rid of that leftover disinfect. We don't ever have to do that again.
No.
The hospital is permanently disinfected.
It is a process. Yeah.
You got to be scrubbing bubbles every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The suck will creep. The suck will creep back in. If it doesn't come from the inside, it comes from the outside.
Yeah.
And you can see it, accept we're human. If you don't, that's a form of suck too. Like people have to be perfect. That's a form of suck, because we're people. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
But we have to learn. And your ego can't be more important than the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, one last question I'd like to ask everybody, which is kind of a silly one, but if you're game, I'd love to have you add to the growing desuckified sound effect library. So I don't know if you've listened to anything, but I have cat sound effects. I love playing around with stuff, and everybody's, done something silly, maybe something that you've done with your kids or with one of your pets or just whatever. So do you have any kind of fun sound effect you can give us that will find its way into this podcast release somehow?
Well, yes. And I hope this is an original. If not, I love sound effects. In fact, a whole other life early on, I even did sound effects before I got into advertising proper.
Very
we were
cool.
doing sound. But this is something that's very useful when somebody says or does something that threatens to suckify a situation. Like, for example, sometimes these are good words, but in some situations, when you're really onto something, inspiring, someone says, well, why don't we just, or, Coke did so-and-so, so why don't we, just, or I don't know if that's a best practice or whatever. And so I think everyone should have this sound effect ready, which is wah, wah, wah. It's just the sound of wah, wah, wah. It's just the sound of
bringing the room down.
Bringing the room down, the air going out of the balloon.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah. And then move past that moment.
I think we've all felt that, even if we didn't literally hear it, we all felt it in our bones at times when somebody did say something like, oh, we couldn't do that, or, we shouldn't do that because, or best practices, blah, 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 blah. So I love that, Mark. I think that is the sound we're trying to diminish as much as possible with this desuckifying effort. And it's never going to go away, but inspire people to think beyond what might create that sound and try to create a more hopeful sound.
Well, you've earned the sound that's probably the sound that comes out of my mouth the most. Woohoo!
I love that.
that's the post desuckifying sound.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
No,
yeah,
I like that.
Says, let's go for it. Woohoo!
I feel
wow, that's bold. Should we show that to the client? Yes. Woohoo!
I like it. And I feel gratitude for getting that sound effect out of you, Mark. So thank you. I think this was a really fun conversation, Mark, and I appreciate you coming on. We probably went a little longer than we thought we might at the beginning, but that's not so surprising. Knowing we both like to chat about this stuff. But before I go, just if there's any place that people can find you, what's the best way for people to know what you're up to?
MarkDi, capital MASSIMO, Mark DiMassimo on LinkedIn. If you reach out to me and you want to connect, and you seem like a real person and not a scammer, and my standards are pretty low, I will connect with you. You can follow me, or you can connect with me. I love. I'm a pretty broad connector on LinkedIn because as you can tell, I love, as you do, I love different perspectives.
Absolutely.
I love to be connected to people where I don't know what I can learn from them yet, So
absolutely.
It's probably the best place. DiGoBrands.com, DiGoBrands.com if you want to check it out. Cool. The agency. And,
Awesome. Mark. Well, I think I'm sure a lot of people will be checking you out because I can reassure everybody that you're a good follow. You're a wonderful person to follow. You put a lot of good stuff out there that makes me think in ways that I haven't necessarily thought. So you give as good as the stuff that you're looking to get. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I've loved seeing your evolution. And I feel like you as you become more and more yourself here in the world, you just deliver more and more value. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, everyone, for checking out the DesuckifyWork podcast. And thanks to Mark for being an energetic and provocative guest. You can follow Mark and DiGo Brands on LinkedIn and check out their site at digobrands.com. That's 3 easy ways to make positive change in your life right now. Bye, everyone.